We often think of these kind of science fiction settings. This is from Star Wars. Everything's new, everything's big. But is it a place you want to live in? You might want to visit it. And then you think of modern day kind of comparisons. Hong Kong, yes, it's exciting, but there is something a little bit inhumane when you're looking at these big settings and you want to go down to street level. And there's something about people meeting, people connecting. That is why the cities were there in the first place. They were there as a place to trade, a place to exchange ideas, a place to meet when it can be a bit lonely being off by yourself. So there's this kind of urge to be together, which people still want to do despite their whole attempts of technology to pull us apart and keep us all independent. So looking at other uses for that building. And the one that had the most resonance in the area when we looked at this space was that it was a film studio. So in parallel to working with the traders, we were actually also working with the Bollywood teams who now use London as their main external location. So if you're watching a Bollywood films, and they are fun, half of them are set in London. And they love using those settings. And this was a serious consideration on how the office building could then become Bollywood. Now, we're very used to looking at redactive uses across the road here, the sandstone buildings. We're converting those into a hotel. And you might go, yeah, old building, hotel, that kind of feels okay. And then you're kind of looking to the project we did in London for Baker Street, where you have a 1950s building. There's an assumption that the 1950s building would be demolished. But you challenge that and go, actually, you can work with that. And it's also looking sort of this theme of our heritage, our existing structures, how those can be part of our tomorrow. Because I think there's this obsession with the future's going to solve everything. Whereas, are we just going to demolish everything of the past and then move on? And that sort of reminds me a little bit of how we were after the Second World War, where everything was taken down and it was all seen as symbol of the past. Here, this was a project that Google looked at, with a few people with phone block, on how you can make a telephone rather than, so you all know your phone comes to the end of its life and you just discard it and get a new one. This idea of plugging in and upgrading your modules. Well, what they found was that this was probably going to lead to more waste, but probably more consumption, because people could, every week or every 2 weeks, keep upgrading their module. So this fell away. And that's a little bit like how the high-tech world of architecture started to look at how you could have buildings which you could plug and play. And this idea of buildings transforming and us not being really aware on how things are going to go in the future sort of made us think about how do we go back. So if we were to look back 100, 200 years ago, the way buildings that are used and constructed then and used today, we wouldn't believe it. So if you have a look here, a scene of London by the French painter Gustave Doré, it's a kind of this dark satanic mills that we talk about in Britain with these kind of very foreboding spaces which cleared of technology become these wide open flexible spaces which now we look at and go, wow, this could be an office, it could be an art school, it could be an art gallery, it can be a home, and a luxurious and very, in-demand home. But this automation, this obviously is what everyone's talking about, and it's something on everyone's mind, but it's also something that's been on people's minds since the 60s and 50s. This whole idea that with technology we'd only be working 2 or 3 days a week, we'd have all that time for leisure and play, and of course what's happened is we've actually become more polarized. People who are working more, and the people who aren't working are getting more and more spread apart. We're fortunate here that in Australia that's not as highly developed as it is in places like Britain or the United States, where things are much more polarized. But when this came about, there was optimism that we would play. I'm also referring Cedric Price, who was one of our crazy teachers at university who used to really push you. And his structures here with his fun palace was really all about these big spaces in which people can then have all of their needs and desires played out. Need to come together. This is a project which always fascinates me. This is in India. This is a pilgrimage site in Kumbh Mela. And this comes every 12 years to the same site. And this is a delta on the Ganges. And when the water goes away, they build a city of 24 million people. Now this is obviously similar to Shanghai, similar to the population of Australia, and it's there for just a few weeks. But it is built on everybody helping each other. From all of the products, the food, moving waste, and when it moves, it takes everything away. Now this is of a scale completely different to the one of the Burning Man or music festivals. But it shows that when people come together, there is this desire to come together and to connect. We're all playing out a role. Facebook, we've got a constructed reality. In the office, there's another one. At home, and people talk about the blurring of work and home, and we discussed this in the office, and it's true. The millennials love that idea of the whole blurring. Other people less so. I worried with all that blurring that it's all going to be about work and not be about the pleasure, which is concerning. And then there's this whole idea of the co-working, and I love this image. It's like this from an advert. Everyone's happy and neat and all collaborating. I mean, the reality is a lot messier, but and the messiness, I think, is a good thing. And it is good that people are messy and they're free to create. And that looks like an office space you'd want to work in rather than that one. But looking ahead then, people saying, oh, I'm going to use technology, we're going to go to Mars, we're going to make all of this. This is where I find it worrying, because we're here talking about a very, very small percentage of the world. We are perhaps that 1 or 2% in the world we fly backwards and forwards. But what's happening to the rest of the world? I mean, we talk about nature and climate change, but we're all part of that. And I think there's a tendency for us to step aside and talk about nature as something separate and talk about how technology is going to create the solutions. Less so here, but especially in Western Europe at the moment, it's becoming a lot more to the fore with climate change. In the 60s, you had people like Archigram who would do these walking cities, and you would move around the earth, a bit like our old kind of hunter-gatherers, where we would just move to where resources were and basically take that. And again, in the future, who knows? London flooded, these come back into play. And are these all autonomous spaces where you can use the sun, the wind to generate your energy, you recycle your water, you become even more insular, you're looking after yourself? And it made me think of these sculptures by an Argentine artist, Thomas Saraceno, who does these installations around the world. These are incredible spaces. When you're in them, you're kind of walking and feeling you're in air. And there's this sense of, does man go into this bubble? Do we have then completely autonomous, and we come together and we coalesce across these kind of pristine landscapes and over the cities? And that feels, it's very idyllic, and it's all, again, very science fiction. But in Europe, you have this reality at the moment. These are migrants, just coming on the shore in Italy, being given these silver blankets to keep warm. And that has also that kind of resonance back to here. But of course, this is the majority, and these numbers of people coming across are huge, and they want to gain access to our resources because they don't have water, they don't have food, so they're coming across. And how are we going to deal with that side? That is something we're not really discussing. And then these encampments, they become cities in their own right, huge cities with their own infrastructure. This is one that was recently closed down in France on the border just by the ferries and Eurostar, the Saint-Gat. That had a fully functioning city in the end with theatres, restaurants, hospitals, but obviously all cleared. Those people aren't going anywhere. They're just being dispersed and trying to get back in. And here you have in Jordan, where the migrants from Syria, they are now staying there. So these are becoming cities of hundreds of thousands of people, and those are functioning cities as well now. So are we not really talking about that either? Now, I'm not going to finish completely on a depressing note. This is a project in Holland, which I love, and it's 50 years old. It's in Apeldoorn. It's the Central Bayer Insurance Group. Their headquarters is built by Herman Hertzberger. If it was built today, it would be seen as, this is the future, this is something completely different. But in fact, this shows a future which I think we've forgotten. When this was built, it was all very low cost materials, concrete, glass blocks, concrete blocks. It was built around social spaces. It was a bit about people communicating, connecting, fully naturally ventilated, natural light, plants, and even, and I love this kind of Dutch pragmatism on the way they do the layouts, they anticipate social people and antisocial people. Because not everybody wants to work in that groups, and it has to be flexible. And this is a space which works exactly in that way today. So people are still in those spaces. They have endured. This is probably, from my mind, a more appealing view of the future. And I love the way that it's built around scale, is repetition. So in a way, it's very mechanical architecture if you were to look at it on plan. And obviously, it's very economic, but it has a soul, it has an understanding of scale. And this, my final slide, is what I think it sums up. As we saw the future 50 years ago, is probably we've lost. And I love the top corner where you've got two colleagues having a coffee and playing chess in a break while people are coming in. That says more about the future that I would want to live in, where you have time to reflect, to spend time with people in structures which, this structure is robust. It will be here in another 100, 200 years' time. And that enduring side of Tomorrowland, whereas yes, we work with technology, but we don't use technology necessarily to solve all our problems.